Leinster take their chances against an injury-hit Munster or Thomond Park. My name's Mark. Let's talk rugby. This game, I think, in the first half was a bit tighter than the final score kind of, indicates, but it felt like as well at times, Munster lacked a little bit of kind of that extra little bit of nous that they needed. And also Leinster, in defence, looked much more comfortable with the changes that Neighbour has made since he's come in as well. But Munster, they're coming forward early on. Henshaw ping for hands on the ruck. Munster up the line into 22. Line out though goes awry and Leinster able to clear. And that was a big thing I think in this game was, both teams terrible lineouts coming into this game. Leinster's functioned. I'm not going to say it was amazing, but it functioned. Munster's for the most part didn't. Billy Burns then kicks in behind, but it actually runs dead. So it's a scrum back to Leinster. And, that wasn't a good thing for Munster because Leinster definitely on top in the scrums. And this solid scrum after reset, Leinster attack down the left, McGrath and Osborne combining well. Then they go to the right, have men over, but Henshaw's pass just very, very poor. Like he's got maybe two, I think it was two guys, it might have been three, but certainly two guys outside him. He's at basically just on the edge of the Munster defence. He goes, for the long pass. And it's not even that it drifts forward. It's just clearly forward. And it should have been a try. Like he could have just gone, instead of going for the glory pass, could have just, gone down the line, put it through the hands. And Leinster probably still have, gone in even if Munster drifted. So poor at the start. And it's kind of indicative, I think, of Leinster this season where, there is quality there, but it's not as much quality as we're maybe used to seeing from them. And then you get little moments like that where you think, okay, yeah, they're not up to the standard of before, but they will then have moments in games where they do hit that peak. And that, as a Leinster fan and as a rugby fan, that's the frustrating part, is that that the ability and the potential is there, but they're just not hitting it as often as we're maybe used to seeing them. But that doesn't mean that, when it's really needed that they won't be able to do it. Leinster then win a penalty at the scrum. Lots of pats on the back for Slimani after every scrum, even the early ones where nothing was awarded. And for me, we have Orgy Snayman and Geordie Barrett, headline grabbers, both brilliant signings by Leinster. But Slimani probably the best so far in terms of utility for the team this year, especially with Furlong out at the moment. And I think it's a good mix there. You've got Furlong, you got Slimani, and then you got Clarkson as well. Young guy coming through, and what a guy to kind of to learn from as well. I'm sure having him around the squad has been brilliant for all the young guys there. Leinster then go to the corner to work the blind side. Josh Van der Fleur coming on wrap. Kelleher stopped a few minutes short. Recycled a few times before McGrath snipes over for them. Prendergast converts that one then for 7 points to 0. And it was just kind of the difference between the teams really there. Like Leinster created the opportunity, and within, I think it was maybe 2 or 3 rucks, McGrath is over to score. Munster then putting the pressure on into Leinster 22. Good carries, including a couple from Coombs. Gets them close, but Leinster do hold them out, but they win a penalty. They go to the corner, win the line out. It's not very clean though. Leinster get in amongst them all, able to disrupt it and turn the ball over. And again, it's just that, the execution for Munster, not quite where, if you look back when they won the URC a couple of seasons ago, that kind of metronomic, thing that they had with their set piece and stuff, just not there for them. And the wider game as well, just it's not that they're like, I'm not gonna say they're dire, they're terrible or whatever. You just feel like they're a little bit off in everything. And it's one of those where you feel like small improvements here, there and everywhere, and you could absolutely see this Munster side being back as a force. But again, similar to the way Leinster with the Henshaw pass, this is kind of indicative of the way Munster have been this season as well. And then from here, then Munster, then they look to move the ball in midfield, but Leinster's blitz defence causing errors. And it does seem that Leinster, blitz defence is certainly bedded in much better now, where they look more comfortable in defence. You can still potentially see, the likes of a Bordeaux, or maybe somebody like obviously Toulouse, but the likes of Harlequins or teams like that can move the ball quickly to space, could potentially cause them problems there. But we have to see. It won't be until they face teams like that. And again, even like La Rochelle in a couple of weeks' time, we expect them to get a good examination of that defence. But certainly at the moment, looking better. Billy Burns then puts a great kick in behind the Leinster defence. It's bobbling. Prendergast kind of hesitates. It's one of these where he doesn't want to kind of to take it and potentially, knock it into touch or wherever. So he waits until he's happy enough with it. But that means that the Munster chasers have already come up. But then he does really well, keeps his cool, slaloms his way up to the edge of the 22. But then because there are so many Munster chasers, they're really good chase from Munster as well. They managed to isolate him, win the penalty. They go up to the line from that penalty. Then they win another penalty, Boyle offside. So they kick that one to the corner. They're applying, lots of pressure, close to the line. Leinster get a warning for the number of penalties. And then eventually Tommy O'Brien goes to the bin for being offside. And for me as a Leinster fan, absolutely fair. Any team like that, once you get a warning, the next guy that gives away a penalty should be straight to the bin. There shouldn't be any more chat after that. Munster then tap it, recycle it, but Ty Byrne is held up over the line. Great defence from Leinster in that period, like Henshaw, Ringrose to the fore. Ringrose put in a great hit, in Munster's build up to that as well. And you just feel like even at that stage, Munster, they need to take their chances. You get into that 22, you get close to the line, you got to be coming away with either 3, 5, or 7 points from that, but they come away with nothing. Even though Leinster did get a yellow card, still, it's the points that count. It doesn't matter if a guy's sitting, on the sideline for 10 minutes if you don't actually score any points in that period. And we see Munster as well struggling against less players, in Europe as well, like against 13 players against Stade. They actually look worse than when it was 15 versus 15. Porter then replaces Boyle after around 20 minutes. And it was a tactical substitution as well, not injury. Boyle wasn't going badly, but apparently it was planned that Porter would play 60 minutes, but from the bench. So kind of an interesting one there. Munster then, they come again. They are bending the line, but Farrell then knocks on in contact again. Pressure from that defence there. But you can see, it wasn't all bad from Munster. You can see that the hands, when they're moving the ball, are better than they have been for much of this season. It's still not quite at the level that they'd wanted to be at, but there certainly is improvement there. Leinster then come forward. They're keeping it tight. They're not going to with the way Munster are trying to do. Especially, they're still only got 14 players. Munster defence so solid, so Prendergast decides to put a grubber in behind. Leinster then putting pressure on the Munster line out, at least the Munster carrying the ball over their own line, 5-metre scrum to Leinster. They then get the nudge in the scrum, win a penalty, which they decide to tap. Kelleher halted about a metre short. Then Porter, he goes close before they spread it, and Prendergast just glides through a gap and over to score, converts his own try for 14-0. Scannell then back on after passing an HIA, overthrows at a line out. Leinster with a chance to attack, but then McGrath gives away a penalty, knocked it on, and then he dives on it, his own knock on, and it basically prevented Coughlin from kicking through. Thought Coughlin was pretty decent at 9, honestly, for for Munster as well. Obviously, Craig Casey with that very bad injury. It looked bad when he went off. The fact that he had to be carried off the field, didn't look like it was going to be, magic sponge, and then he's back out for the next game. But then halftime is 14 points to nil. Second half, then Porter pinged in the scrum. Munster go to the corner from the penalty. Ahern, he claims the line out before Leinster, penalised for offside. It's Porter again. And then Scannell taps the penalty at the second attempt. He got warned because he kind of dummied the first one. I didn't catch what he said to the referee when he's talking to him about it later, but I think he just said to him genuinely that he just missed the ball or something. Second time then, he does tap and go. Leinster looked like they come off the line early from that and probably should have been penalised from that. They do concede a penalty anyway. And I'm feeling like they must be close to another warning at this stage. Munster tap again. Leinster hold them out, but they come in at the side. Munster then go out to Hodnett, who finds Ahern, and then he slides over to score. And I feel like, given the fact that Leinster, they were playing the penalty advantage, that if it hadn't been a try, I think that Leinster would have got another warning. They certainly deserve one after that. Burns then converts for 14 points to 7. Munster, but they really had to work for that score. But it certainly would have been worse if they'd come away with nothing, the way it happened to them in the first half and the couple of occasions that they had there. Leinster then win, scrum penalty, kick that to the corner. Then Paddy Patterson and Fintan Gunn come on as both teams replace their scrum halves. And again, like these guys coming on just shows that there's quality there, deeper in these squads as well. Obviously Leinster have more depth than any of the other provinces, but Paddy Patterson, he did well. Todd Coughlin again did well while he was on too. But I guess the difference is, Munster's pack, although when you look at them individually, there's some quality players in there, just stacked up against the Leinster pack as a whole, just kind of struggled a bit too much in the game. But Leinster then secure a line out, they recycle it, move the ball in field, and then Van der Fleer picks and goes over to score. The conversion then makes it 21 points to 7. And, with a little bit of daylight between the teams and the fact that Munster had to work so hard for those 7 points that they got, you feel like, it's going to be a big ask for them at this stage then. Leinster then win a scrum penalty, but it gets overruled because there's a crock roll from Henshaw. So Munster, they get to go up the line. They move it across, that aggressive Leinster blitz. But just as they seem to actually find a bit of space out on the right, Hodnett knocks it on. And again, that's the difference, I think, in the Leinster defence now, is that they're able to put so much pressure on the opposition that the skills have to be absolutely right there, and the handling to be able to, to make that space first of all, and then exploit it as well. They just weren't able to do it. But Munster do have a period of possession, but it is mostly kind of around halfway, and they're again under pressure from that Leinster defence. Leinster then managed to get their hands on the ball. They come forward after a break from Tommy O'Brien down the left. They just decided 22. Then Ross Byrne decides to try a kick in behind, but that was really well covered by Nash. And then, there's the dropout from them. Leinster were kind of working back to the edge of the 22. Then Ringrose breaks into that 22 before Joe McCarthy carries close to the line. Munster give away a penalty. They halt Leinster on the line, and we come back for that penalty. Leinster then tap the penalty. The initial surge is halted, but it's recycled quickly, and Doris just smashes away over to score, converted by Ross Byrne for 28 points to 7, and that's the bonus point and the game. Leinster then, they go to the corner from another penalty in search of more points in the closing minutes. Doris comes on a wrap from the line out and goes close. Leinster then spread it, but Munster's defence was able to drive them back by the time they're working out to the right to Tommy O'Brien. They then come back infield, Larmer stepping well, for some good ground. Then Joe McCarthy gets them within a couple of meters before Leinster go over the line. We have a team overview. On field is no try because the referee can't see a grounding. Lee Barron thinks he has got it down. I thought Kieran Ryan did well to tackle him, and it seems like Barron might have grounded it, but it's not conclusive. It's no try. Goal line dropout. Absolutely correct decision. If the referee hasn't seen it and the camera angles can't be conclusive about it, it doesn't matter what the players think at that stage. You can't give a try, and that was fair. So full time was at 28 points to 7. It was a really it was a good game without really hitting the heights because Munster weren't ever really at the point where they were putting pressure on Leinster in terms of the scoreboard and threatening any kind of comeback. But I do, even as a Leinster fan, I do hope that we see improvement in Munster because the rivalry between these two teams, obviously the biggest rivalry in Ireland, probably in terms, certainly one of the biggest rivalries in Europe, if not the biggest. I'm sure, other countries would disagree with that. But I think in the URC, possibly the biggest rivalry that we have, certainly of the European teams. And one of the biggest rivalries, I think, in world rugby in terms of club, provincial or regional teams as well. So, as a Leinster fan, and I talk about this again, I'm a Leinster fan, but I'm a rugby fan, and I don't get pleasure from seeing other teams struggling. I'm not one that thinks, oh, brilliant. I'm happy that Leinster won, but I want to see a better Munster team. And they showed a couple of seasons ago by lifting the URC that they do have the potential there, and that's again frustrating is that you want to see them at that level and going further as well and doing well in Europe. I remember for years Munster's quest to win the old Heineken Cup, and that was some of the most exciting times I've had in rugby, cheering for them, not even for my own team. And then Leinster came later and kind of emulated them as well. So I want to see the Irish teams doing well, and then I want to see the URC teams doing well. Also, I'm not one that thinks, okay, I'll only cheer for the Irish teams, and then if the Welsh or the Scottish or South African teams lose, well then, so what? I don't care. Well, I do care. I want to see, I support my team, I support my country, I support the teams in my country, I support my league and the teams in my league as well. And that's kind of the way I've always been, stuff like that. So I want to see, the kind of everybody rising up, not just one team, be it Leinster or anyone else, being kind of the flag bearer for the league. I want to see the whole league kind of rising up, and that's why I'm excited about Glasgow's improvement over the last couple of seasons. The fact that they've now won themselves a URC. That's why I'm disappointed about the choice by the South African teams to select weakened teams in the European competitions as well, in the the Champions Cup. I can see the argument for it, given the travel, etc. But it's still a disappointment. But yeah, back to this one. So we're going to have a look at some of the stats and then just quickly talk about each of the teams. So let me pull those stats up now. So we're going to start on attack as usual. So tries, 1 try for Munster and 4 for Leinster. And again, Leinster didn't take every chance that they got, but they certainly took more chances than Munster did. And part of the difference between teams was that ability not only to take points when you've gotten into the 22, but the also kind of the how many phases it took to actually get over the line as well. We talked about Leinster's first score where it was a kick to the corner. They did the wrap. They had a ruck. They recycle it. I think they had another ruck. Yeah, they definitely had another ruck, as whether they had a third ruck or not. But then McGrath is over to score. So they had, like, they obviously had their set moves, and they'd done the homework in terms of trying to create that space to get somebody over. Whereas, like, Munster's score was, much more work for them, and that's something, again, I think Munster from a couple of seasons ago would have had a bit more of a cutting edge, and it doesn't. It obviously, it matters in some ways that the other team are infringing and maybe stopping potential scores, but at the same time, it felt like Munster were just going to batter their way over, and Leinster didn't really have to worry too much about them going wide too often when they were into 22 as well. But then onto possession, 47% for Munster, 53 for Leinster. Munster did have a lot of their possession in around the halfway line, especially during the yellow card period as well. Clean breaks then just 2 for Munster and 9 for Leinster. So, again, it speaks to that, improvement in the Leinster defence, but also that lack of cutting edge from Munster. I think, injuries obviously have had an impact. I thought Abrams was the guy that was giving in that cutting edge out wide. Nash didn't get on the ball as much, as he would have liked to. But I don't think Munster were trying to suck in that Leinster defence and then go to Witt, but a lot of the time they didn't get to the point where they went to mid Witt. So Nash was coming inside looking for stuff like that. Then defenders beaten 20 for Munster and 30 for Leinster. So, you look at that and you think, okay, Munster, they beat a lot of defenders, but again, they weren't actually breaking the line with that. So it was a lot of these kind of ones where you beat a defender, but you're almost standing still when you've gotten by him, and then you get smashed with somebody else. So it wasn't really, testing the defence as much as they would have wanted. And then offloads as well, 9 for Munster, 10 for Leinster. Leinster, I think, the build up to one of the tries, right? It was it James Ryan offload off the ground to Van der Fleer, I think, for his score. So their offloads I thought were more impactful, certainly than Munster's one. Territory then 44% to 56. And I thought Leinster kind of managed the game a little bit better than Munster. The kicking game, like Billy Burns, normally his kicking game is decent, but I think Leinster's back three kind of covered it well. And then Prendergast, I thought, did well too. He hit a monster kick out of his 22 at one stage as well. Number of tackles then 185 for Munster, 177 for Leinster, and missed tackles 30 to 20. Tackle success 80% for Munster, certainly down on where they would like to be. Leinster 83 is actually pretty decent for them, especially given that they are blitzing. Turnovers 1 then 5 for Munster, 4 for Leinster. It wasn't one of those games where I think the game just wasn't tight enough where there were massive cheers for turnovers and stuff like that. Kicks retained then 5 for Munster and 1 for Leinster, so that's one part where I think Munster did well. They did a lot where, like, whether it was Farrell or Hurley or Nash or whoever, where the player going after the ball wasn't necessarily there to catch it. What he was doing was he was getting up most of the time. Like I saw a few times at least where they get up there, they get right beside the Leinster player and then turn their back to them, so both players are facing towards like the Munster line, and then they go up and just bat the ball back, and then they had the players there, and it was a tactic that certainly worked for them, but they didn't have enough around that to actually exploit it as well. Penalties conceded then 7 for Munster, which is decent, and 12 for Leinster, certainly more than they'd want. And I think if Munster hadn't have gotten their try when they did, they probably would have had like a second yellow card out of the game as well. Onto individual players then. Successful carries. Tom Ahern 6. He's certainly one of the bright lights for Munster at the moment. It can't be too long before we're going to see that guy kind of regularly in Ireland panels as well. And then Jamie Osborne, returning for Leinster, I thought he was really good there at fullback as well. 7 carries for him. Clean breaks then, 1 for Gavin Coombs. Wasn't as much of a try threat as we've seen him in the past, but certainly carried well, defended well too. Luke McGrath then 2 clean breaks for Leinster. I thought he did well at 9. Defenders beaten then 5 for Billy Burns, but it kind of depends, but you don't always want to see your 10 being the guy beating the most defenders. You'd rather that he was the guy given the pass to put somebody that can maybe exploit a break a bit more through the line. Caelan Doris then with 5 for Leinster as well. Meters made then Mike Haley 115 for Munster. He's one of those players where he rarely gets kind of the plaudits that other backs get, but the guy is a really solid player, and I'm not sure that he's gonna win a ton of caps for Ireland or anything like that, but he's the kind of guy that if you put him in, he's gonna give you a decent performance. He doesn't have too many poor games, or against he doesn't have too many games where he kind of takes the game by the scruff of the neck either. Jamie Osborne then with 53 for Leinster, and then offloads Haley with 2 and Osborne with 2 as well. Onto defence then, number of tackles. Gavin Coombs 18 again, as I said, very good defensive performance from him. 19 from Caelan Doris. Both sides of the ball, I thought Doris was really good. Like, he's had an excellent season so far, honestly. Turnovers 1 then, 1 for Calvin Nash. Again, part of that coming in and looking for work rather than kind of hanging out on his wing, which is nice to see. And then Ronan Kelleher with 1 for Leinster as well. I thought, probably one of his better games that we've seen from Kelleher certainly this season. Onto then the teams themselves. So we start with Munster, the home team. They do have a long injury list, so you've got to keep that in mind. But at the same time, they're not the only team with a long injury list, so you can't kind of dismiss everything because of that. But it does have an effect, certainly, and certainly in a big game like this. They had chances in the first half to get themselves, level, and even if they'd taken one of those, potentially with others then to get themselves in front, but they couldn't convert any of them. Passing and movement, beginning to look more fluid, but again, still lacks that cutting edge. Set piece struggled, especially the scrum, but also with both teams coming into this with shaky lineouts. Again, it was their lineout that malfunctioned too often, and it feels like there's lots of work ahead now. Big European games coming up. They've got Saracens at home, which is pretty much a must-win game for them. It's going to be a big test for them. Then on to Leinster. Defence certainly looking better. Lineout was improved without totally looking convincing. If given that Munster were having so many struggles in their lineout, and that they didn't have as many of maybe like their the likes of Peter Manny, etc., who would be putting pressure on their lineout as well. I don't think we can judge it too much, but certainly as a Leinster fan, it's good that it's improved. I'm just not convinced that it's fixed. Scrum went really well, both sides of the ball. Took their chances when they created them. Jamie Osborne back, certainly a boost for them. Joe McCarthy got through a mountain of work. Looked better than his recent starts for Leinster and Ireland as well. Kelleher, again, one of his best performances of the season. Thought it was an interesting tactic to bring Porter on after 20 minutes. Thinking, are they maybe starting with Boyle, thinking, okay, well, if we can get kind of on top of the scrum and then bring Porter on, it's not going to be one of these where the referee immediately is looking at him anytime the scrum goes down. Maybe you've already gotten in the ref's head that you're the dominant team, so therefore it must be the opposition's fault. Porter did give away a scrum penalty though when he came on, but overall fairly solid. It's 9 in a row now in the URC. They'll obviously want to maintain their 100% record for the season in the Champions Cup as well. They've now got 2 weeks to prepare for, what I think easily will be the toughest test so far this season, which is that La Rochelle game away. But that's it for this one. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments.